She put both her hands flat against the guard's chest and looked up at him the way a child looks at a parent in a crowded place, and she did not say a single word. I was close enough to see it happen. I had come to the forecourt of Harrowmere Palace that morning for no better reason than the light. I am a man who photographs old stone for a living, and the long gilded railing along the south wall turns the color of honey just after 9. I had my camera up. I had been framing the sentry box and the single guardsman who stood inside the painted line, rifle at his shoulder, bearskin pulled low, when the small gray figure crossed the cobbles and pressed her palms to the red wool of his tunic, as though she had finally, after a long and frightening journey, arrived somewhere she knew. She wore a quilted housecoat the color of dried lavender, house slippers, one of them on the wrong foot, no coat, though the morning had a bite in it. Her hair had been pinned that morning by hands that loved her and had since come undone, so that thin white wisps stood out around her head in the cold light. She was perhaps 80, and she was lost in the particular, terrible way that has nothing to do with maps. The guard did not move. I lowered the camera. Everyone near the rail had gone still the way people do when they sense, before they understand, that something is about to require them to be better than they usually are. A tour group had been laughing about the guardsman's stillness a moment before. A teenager had been doing the stiff-armed walk, the way they always do, and now nobody was laughing. The woman's hands trembled against the guard's chest. Her lips moved, but no sound came that I could hear. It was not speech. It was a plea made entirely of the body. Please, please, I don't know where I am. Please be the one who knows. I want to tell you what happened over the next 40 minutes, because I have thought about it every day since, and because I am ashamed to say my first instinct was the wrong one. My first instinct was to lift the camera again. I didn't. I will get to why. The guardsman's name, I would learn much later, was Sergeant Adler Vane, though that morning he was only the man in the box, a fixed point in a uniform that is designed to make a person into a symbol so completely that you forget there is a heartbeat under all that wool. The whole architecture of his job is that he does not see you. You may shout, you may dance, you may push your face an inch from his and breathe. The discipline is that the world washes over him like weather over a statue and he gives it nothing. That is the contract. That is what the line painted on the cobbles means. Cross it, and the world expects the statue to stay a statue. She had crossed it. She was standing inside the painted line with her slippers and her wrong foot and her undone hair, and she was holding on to him because some last working part of her had decided that this tall, still man in the bright coat was safe, was home, was the thing she had been trying to find. And Sergeant Vane looked down. I saw it. The chin under the strap came down 1/4 of an inch. The eyes, which are trained to fix on a middle distance and stay there through anything, dropped and found her face and stayed. It does not sound like much. A man lowered his eyes, but you have to understand what that small motion costs in that uniform, what every fiber of his training screamed against it, to know that I was watching a man decide something. The crowd felt it too. A woman beside me put her hand over her mouth. He did not step back. That was the thing I keep returning to. The easy move, the protocol move, the safe move, was to step back, to call sharply for the duty officer, to let the apparatus of the palace fold this confused old woman up and carry her off to the side where the public would not see. Instead, he stood his ground and let her hold on to him, and he looked at her the way you look at someone you have been told to find, and his lips moved. I was too far to hear, but I learned later from him, in the slow, careful way he tells it, what he said. He said, "I have you, you found me." Not "who are you," not "you can't be here," not "step back, ma'am." He read in 1/2 second that she was not a threat and not a trespasser but a person who was drowning, and he threw her the only line that would hold. "You found me. You did the hard thing. You arrived," as though she had been searching for him specifically and had at last succeeded and could now stop being afraid, as though he had been her destination all along. Her shoulders came down from around her ears. I watched the fear go out of her face the way a fever breaks. She did not understand where she was. She did not, I am sure, know what year it was, or whose palace this was, or that hundreds of strangers were watching her. But she understood, in the only language she had left, that the tall man in the red coat had told her she was safe, and she believed him, because some things you go on believing long after you have forgotten everything else. Then she said the first words any of us heard her say. "Is it time?" she asked him. "Are they coming home?" And I saw something cross the guardsman's face, gone in an instant, the discipline closing over it like water, that told me he had no idea who she meant, and that it did not matter, and that he was not going to let her stand alone in front of the world while she asked the air whether the people she loved were coming home. "Soon," he said. "Stay with me until they come. You don't have to do anything but stand right here." "I won't leave." I have replayed those words 100 times. I won't leave. A king's guardsman on the painted line, with the whole weight of 3 centuries of protocol bearing down on him, telling him to do precisely the opposite, to defer, to disengage, to remand her to someone whose job it was, and what he chose to say was, "I won't leave." That was when I put my camera down on the cobblestones beside my foot and I walked toward the rail, because it had occurred to me, finally, what was being asked of all of us who happened to be standing there. Not to film, to form a wall. I did not know yet that the next 40 minutes would teach me more about courage than the wars I had photographed in my 20s. I did not know that by the time it was over there would be 3 other strangers standing shoulder to shoulder with me, that the duty officer would make a decision that could have ended his career, that a frantic family would come running across the forecourt with a photograph held out in front of them like a lantern. I knew only that an old woman was holding onto a soldier as if he were the last solid thing in a sliding world, and that the soldier had decided he would be exactly that. I stepped up to the rail, and I began, quietly, to do the one useful thing left to me. I started telling the people around me to lower their phones. It is harder than you would think. A crowd that has scented drama is a thing with its own appetite, and that appetite is for the spectacle, not the person. I said it low to the ones nearest me. "Put it down. She's frightened. Don't let her see herself filmed." The teenager who had been mocking the guards marched 2 minutes earlier, a gangly boy in a soccer shirt, looked at me, looked at the old woman, and then, to his enormous credit, slid his phone into his pocket and turned to the people behind him and said the same thing I had said, in his own words, which were sharper than mine and worked better. Word went down the rail like a candle being passed. The phones came down, not all of them, but enough that when the woman next glanced around, bewildered, searching, she did not see a forest of black glass lenses pointed at her face. She saw people. She saw a quiet morning and a few kind strangers and the tall man holding still beside her. I want to be precise about what the guardsman was doing during all this, because if you were not close you would have said he was doing nothing at all. He was standing his post. From 30 feet he looked exactly as he had looked an hour before, rifle at the shoulder, spine like a plumb line, the bearskin a black weight pulling his chin level. The genius and the agony of it was that he held the form. He did not crouch. He did not put his arm around her, which is what every soft instinct in a watching person wants a man to do for a frightened grandmother. He understood something I only worked out afterward, that the form was the comfort. The stillness she had crossed the whole forecourt to reach, that was the thing telling her she was safe. If he had broken down into an ordinary, fussing, helpful man, he would have become just another part of the confusing, sliding world. By staying the unmovable bright pillar she had found, he stayed her landmark. He let her keep one fixed thing. So he held, and he spoke to her, barely moving his lips, in a voice so low that only she and the nearest few of us could catch it. "What's your name?" he asked her. "Me," she said. Then doubtfully, as if testing a coat that no longer fit, "Margaret, they call me." "Me," he said, as though it were the finest name he had heard. I'm glad you came to find me. You picked the right man. I don't move. You can hold on as long as you like." "I was looking," she said. Her voice climbed, thin and rising toward panic. "I was looking for the gate. There's a gate, the blue gate. I have to be at the blue gate when they come, or they'll think no one came for them," her hands fisted in his tunic. "Where's the blue gate? I can't find the blue gate." And here is where I learned the first hard thing about that kind of forgetting. You cannot argue with the geography of a vanished world. There was no blue gate. There had not been a blue gate within a mile of that palace in living memory, if there had ever been one at all. The blue gate was somewhere 60 years gone, a real place once, the place where she had waited for someone, a husband shipping home, a son. I never did learn, and her mind, shedding everything else, had kept that one burning errand. Be at the blue gate when they come. A lesser man would have corrected her. "There's no blue gate here, ma'am. You're confused, you've wandered off, let's get you sorted." Every one of those true sentences would have been a small cruelty, because each one would have told her that the one task she had left, the task that organized the ruins of her, was a lie. The guardsman did not correct her. "You're at the gate," he said. "You found it. This is the place. You're exactly where you're meant to be, and I'm standing the watch with you so you don't have to watch alone. When they come, they'll come right here. I promise you they'll know where to look." I heard a small sound beside me. The woman who had put her hand over her mouth was crying, quietly, the way you cry when something is too large to hold. I understood her. He had taken the impossible thing the old woman needed, a gate that no longer existed, a homecoming 60 years late, and instead of breaking it, he had moved himself into its center. He had made himself the gate. He had become the fixed blue landmark she had spent her whole sliding morning trying to reach. "Stand here," he was telling her. "I am the place. You are home." She quieted again. She kept one hand knotted in his tunic, but the panic ebbed, and she began heartbreakingly to wait, to stand the watch with him. An old woman in a lavender housecoat and one slipper on the wrong foot, keeping a vigil at a gate that lived only in her, and a king's guardsman keeping it with her, because she had asked him to, and because he had decided that no protocol on earth was worth the price of telling her she was alone. That was when the boots came. I heard them before I saw the man, the hard, fast, certain footfalls of someone whose entire job is to make problems on the forecourt go away before the public can photograph them. He came out of the shadow of the arch at a clipped march, a tall officer in the darker uniform of the duty staff, peaked cap, gloves, a radio already up at his mouth. The crowd's quiet curdled into a new kind of tension. We all knew, without being told, that the soft, strange grace of the last few minutes was about to collide with the rules. The officer reached the line. He took in the scene in one sweep, the breached perimeter, the unknown woman with her hands in a guardsman's tunic, the guardsman's eyes down and engaged, the crowd, the phones, the cameras that hadn't been lowered. Every part of it was a violation of something written down. I watched his jaw set. I braced for the sharp voice, the gloved hand on the old woman's shoulder, the brisk professional removal of the problem. "Sergeant," the officer said, low and hard. "Step off and let me take this." And Sergeant Vane, who had not broken his form for the mockery of teenagers or the press of a crowd or 3 centuries of standing orders, did the second unthinkable thing I watched him do that morning. He answered. A guardsman on post does not speak to be addressed by a passing officer. He does not negotiate. The chain of command is absolute, and the correct response to "step off and let me take this" is to step off. Instead, without turning his head, in that same low voice he had been using on the old woman so as not to frighten her, Sergeant Vane said one sentence to his superior officer. "Sir," he said, "if I move she falls." The officer stopped. I saw it land. I saw the officer really look at the woman for the first time, not as a breach but as a person, at the way her whole frail weight had tilted into the guardsman, at the white-knuckled fist in the red wool, at the slipper on the wrong foot. And I watched a man who had marched across that forecourt to enforce a rule arrive instead at the edge of a much harder decision. The kind they do not write down for you. The kind you have to make alone with the whole weight of your career sitting on the wrong side of the scale. He keyed his radio, and for a moment none of us breathed. "Control," the officer said. "I have a vulnerable elderly female inside the south perimeter, disoriented, no immediate threat. I am holding position. Get me a medic to the south rail discreet and start a welfare check. Anyone reported a missing woman, white hair, lavender housecoat, 80s in the last hour. No uniforms charging in. Walk it in soft." A pause. The radio crackled. Then he added, and I will remember the exact shape of it as long as I live, "And tell anyone who asks that Sergeant Vane is following my direct order. Whatever happens here, that's the record. He's acting on my authority." It took me a second to understand what the officer had just done. He had not enforced the rule. He had reached down and picked up the weight himself. If a breach of protocol was going to be written up, if a confused old woman holding a guardsman in front of a phone-wielding crowd was going to cost somebody, the officer had just decided it would cost him, not the sergeant. He had made himself the shield for the shield. I have spent a lot of my life around men in uniform, and I will tell you that the rarest thing you ever see is not bravery under fire. It is a man with rank choosing, in a quiet moment with no medal in it, to put his own name on the line so that a better thing can happen. "Sergeant," the officer said, softer now, "hold her, I've got the rest." "Yes, sir," said Vane, and never moved. The officer turned to us at the rail. I expected to be told to disperse. Instead he found my eyes, I think because I was the one who had been moving among the crowd getting the phones down, and he said, You've got a level head. Keep this side calm. Don't let anyone crowd her. Don't let anyone film her face." He said it like a man delegating, like I was suddenly part of his operation, and the strange thing is that it worked. Being given a job steadied me the way it had steadied the old woman. So I became the wall. I was not the only one. The crying woman beside me wiped her face and stepped up on my left without being asked, spreading her arms a little, the universal posture of a mother keeping something safe behind her. The boy in the soccer shirt took my right, jaw set, suddenly years older than he had been when he was doing the funny walk. A fourth stranger, a broad, quiet man in a delivery company's polo shirt who had clearly been on his way somewhere and was now going to be late, planted himself at the end of our short line and folded his arms. The four of us, who had never met and would never meet again, stood shoulder to shoulder along the rail and made of ourselves a soft barrier between the frightened old woman and the appetite of the crowd. Behind us, people understood and gave us room. The forecourt, which a few minutes earlier had been a churn of tourists and noise, organized itself around the small, still center of an old woman and the man who would not leave her. I could hear them now, Vane and me, low and constant like the murmur of water. "Are they late?" she asked him. "They were never late." "He was never late my whole life. If he's late, something's." "He's not late," Vane said. "There's no late at this gate. The watch holds until they come and not a minute past. That's the rule here. You can rest. The clock waits for us." "You're a good boy," she told him suddenly, with the bright certainty of someone who has slipped in her own mind into a different decade. "You always were a good boy. Are you cold? You'll catch your death standing out here. Where's your coat?" And the guardsman, the immovable pillar, the symbol, the man whose whole craft is to give the world nothing, said, "I'm warm, Mum. I've got my good coat on, you see. The red one. You always liked the red one." I heard the boy beside me make a small broken sound. We all heard it. Me had reached into her ruined memory and pulled up a son, and Sergeant Vane, rather than let her stand there grieving a boy who was not there, had quietly agreed to be him. Not to lie to her, there was no lie in it, not really. To give her, for a few minutes at the false blue gate, the small mercy of a son who had come, who was warm, who was wearing the red coat she liked. He let her be a mother again. He let her have her good boy back. The cost of it, what it must have taken to stand inside that uniform and let a stranger's grief mistake him for the dead, I cannot pretend to measure. "There she is," murmured the delivery man at the end of our line, and nodded across the forecourt. A young woman in scrubs was walking toward us, fast but careful, a medic's bag over her shoulder and the officer at her elbow, and she had been briefed, because she slowed as she neared the rail and approached not as a responder but as a granddaughter might, soft and easy. She crouched a little distance off in me's sightline and said in a warm, ordinary voice, "Hello, me. My name's Priya. Adler's been keeping you company, has he? He's good at that." She did not lunge. She did not say, "Come with me." She let me look at her and decide she was not a danger. "She knows my name," I heard me say wonderingly to Vane. "Everyone here knows you," Vane said. "You're well looked after, I told you. This is the right place." While the medic talked me through whether she had taken anything that morning, whether she had a pain anywhere, whether she would let her hold her wrist kindly, sideways, never head-on, the welfare check the officer had ordered was doing its quiet work somewhere beyond the gates, and I watched the officer's radio earpiece, and I watched his face change. He stepped close to me because I was the nearest steady person and spoke under his breath as though I were a colleague. "We've got a match, care resident 6 streets north. Resident left through a fire door during the early shift change. They've had crews out looking for 40 minutes, terrified. The family's been called. They're on their way." He let out a breath. 40 minutes. She crossed 6 streets and a main road in slippers and found her way here, of all the places in the city. "Why here?" I asked him. "Why the palace?" He looked at the old woman, and at the guardsman bent over her in his bright, unmoving coat, and something in his hard, professional face went very quiet. "The blue gate," he said. "She was looking for a sentry box and a man in a red coat standing the watch. There hasn't been one near her old home in 50 years. He shook his head slowly. "But there's one here. She wasn't lost, exactly. She was navigating. She was steering by the last landmark she could still see." I have thought about that sentence more than almost any other from that day. She was steering by the last landmark she could still see. The whole confused, terrible journey across 6 streets and a main road had a logic after all. Somewhere in the wreckage, a compass needle still swung true toward a fixed thing, a soldier, a sentry box, a red coat, a man who stood and did not leave, and she had followed it across a city until she found one. And the miracle, the thing I had been lucky enough to stand 20 feet from, was that when she arrived, the man she found had understood exactly what he was for. He had not corrected her compass. He had agreed to be true north. Then across the forecourt, a sound rose that turned every head, a woman's voice, cracked open with relief and terror at once, calling a name. "Mum M.A.G. Oh God, Mum." And a family came running through the arch, the way you run only towards someone you were sure you had lost. There were 3 of them. A woman of perhaps 50 in a coat thrown on over pajamas, a younger woman gripping a phone in one hand and an old framed photograph in the other, and a man hanging back a step, the way the men in families often do, looking like he wanted to be useful and did not know how. The older woman was already crying. She had run the 6 streets, I think, or driven them and abandoned the car. She reached the edge of our little human wall and stopped short, because the medic put up a gentle hand, and the officer stepped in fast and quiet, and I understood the reason for the caution a half-second before they did. "You cannot run at her." If the family came barreling in, 3 frantic shouting strangers, the old woman, who at that moment believed she was 60 years younger, standing at a blue gate she had found at last, with her good boy in the red coat, would not see her daughter and her granddaughter. She would see strangers rushing her. She would panic. And the careful, safe island Sergeant Vane had built in the middle of the forecourt, plank by patient plank, would come apart in an instant. The officer caught the daughter by the arm, not roughly but firmly enough to stop her, and said something low and urgent. I caught the end of it. "She's safe. She's calm. She doesn't know you yet. You have to come in slow or you'll lose her. Slow. Let the guardsman keep the lead. Trust him." And the daughter, to her everlasting credit, with her mother 20 feet away after the worst 40 minutes of her life, did the hardest thing a frightened person can do. She made herself stop. She made herself walk. What does she answer to? The medic asked the daughter quietly. Right now, who does she think she is? The daughter's face crumpled as she understood the question. When she goes back, she's a young woman, waiting for Dad to come home from sea. He died in '91. She waits at the gate. Her voice broke. There was a gate where they used to live by the old naval dock, painted blue. She'd take a flask and wait every time his ship came in. She's been trying to get to that gate for 2 years. We keep telling her it's gone. We keep telling her. She put her hand over her mouth, and I saw her realize all at once the cruelty of every true correction. We keep telling her it's gone. He didn't tell her it's gone, I said. I don't know why I spoke. I had no standing there. But I nodded toward the guardsman and the small woman holding his coat. He told her she found it. He's been standing the watch with her. He told her your father isn't late. The daughter looked at the tall, still soldier and the white-haired woman gazing up at him. And whatever was holding her together gave way and held at the same time, the way it does when grief and relief arrive in the same breath. Then the medic, Priya, did the gentlest piece of work I have ever watched a professional do. She crouched beside me again and said easily, there's someone come to the gate, a friend of yours. She's been waiting to see you. Is it all right if she comes and stands the watch too? And Vane, taking the cue without a flicker, bent his head a fraction toward the old woman and said, More company for us, me. The more the merrier at this gate. Shall we let her in? Is she nice? Me asked, suspicious like a small girl. She's the nicest, Vane said. She loves you something terrible. Look, here she comes. The daughter walked the last 20 feet at the pace of someone crossing ice. She arrived softly into me's sightline beside the guardsman, and she did not grab, did not weep openly, did not cry out, Mum, it's me, don't you know me, though every cell of her must have been screaming it. She matched the guardsman's register. She said warmly, as if greeting an old friend at a long-ago dock, Hello, me. What a fine morning for it. Are they doing soon, then? Me studied her. For one terrible moment I thought it would not land, that the daughter was a stranger and would stay a stranger, and I saw the daughter feel that moment too, saw her steel herself to be a kind stranger for as long as it took, if that was what her mother needed. Then something flickered behind the old woman's eyes. Not full recognition, I don't think she surfaced all the way to her daughter's actual name, but a warmth, a settling, the way you relax near a person your body remembers as safe even when your mind has mislaid the file. You came, me said. I knew someone would come. I told him, she patted the guardsman's tunic. I told this good boy someone would come for me. Didn't I tell you? You did, said Vane. You never doubted it. You see, me said to her daughter, with the deep satisfaction of a point proven, I waited at the right gate. And the daughter said, through tears she would not let into her voice, You did, me. You waited at exactly the right gate. You always knew the way. That was the moment the whole forecourt seemed to exhale. The crying woman beside me was openly weeping now and did not care. The boy in the soccer shirt had his fist pressed to his mouth. The delivery man was blinking hard at the cobblestones. I realized my own face was wet, and I, who had photographed grief on 3 continents and trained myself to keep the glass between me and it, did not lift my camera and was glad, fiercely glad, that it was lying forgotten on the stones by my foot. But it was not over, and the hardest part for the guardsman was still to come. Because me would have to be walked away from the gate, and the gate in her mind was him. I watched the medic and the daughter and the officer trade a glance, the silent arithmetic of how to move her without frightening her, and I watched the guardsman understand, before any of them said it, that the one thing that would break her now was for her landmark to step back and disappear. If the red coat simply went still and stopped answering, if the gate she had crossed a city to find suddenly turned to stone and ignored her, she would be lost all over again, more lost than before, abandoned at the gate by the one fixed thing she had trusted. So he could not just resume his post. He could not let her go the way the protocol demanded. He had to hand her over without ever once letting her feel handed over. He had to give away the watch. And I saw Sergeant Vane gather himself for it, saw the small, steadying breath go into that motionless chest, and bend his head one more time to the old woman who thought he was her son, to do the last and most delicate thing the morning would ask of him, to release her so gently that she would never know she had been released at all. "Me," he said, "the watch is done, they've come home, you can stand down now." She went very still, listening. "You did your duty," he told her, and there was something in the way he said duty, the way only a man who has built his whole life around that word can say it, that made it land like a benediction. "You waited at the gate every day all those years, and the ship came in, and now the watch is done. You're relieved. You hear me? You're relieved of the watch. You can rest now. This good friend of yours is going to take you somewhere warm, and there's tea, and you've earned it. You did everything right." I understood what he was doing. He had reached into the one structure her mind had kept intact, the watch, the waiting, the duty at the gate, and he had used its own logic to set her free. He had not pulled her away from her post. He had given her permission to leave it honorably, the watch completed, the ship home, the duty discharged. He was not abandoning the landmark. He was releasing the sentry, and a sentry can leave her post when she is properly relieved. "It's done?" Mee asked. Her voice was small. "I can stop watching." "It's done," Vane said. "I'll stand the rest. You've stood enough. Go and be warm." Slowly, finger by finger, her hand came loose from the red wool of his tunic. She smoothed the place where she had gripped it, the way you smooth a coat you have rumpled, an absurd small courtesy that undid every one of us watching. "You're a good boy," she said again. "Tell your father I waited." "He knows," said Vane. "He always knew. He's proud of you." The daughter stepped in then, in that warm friend-at-the-gate voice, and put her arm through her mother's as if they had walked 1,000 mornings arm in arm, which I suppose they had. "Come on, Mee. There's tea, and the radiator's on. Mind the cobbles, they're uneven here." And Mee went with her, went easily, willingly, a tired woman walking home after a long, faithful watch, leaning on a friend whose name she could not hold but whose love she could feel in the crook of her arm. She did not look back at the guardsman with any fear. Why would she? The gate was where she had left it. The watch was kept. The good boy in the red coat had told her so, and some things you go on believing. They walked her out through the soft-formed channel the crowd made for them, the medic on one side and the daughter on the other, and the younger granddaughter ahead with the old framed photograph still clutched in her hand. A photograph, I saw as she passed, of a young man in a sailor's uniform standing at a gate, and the gate behind him was painted, unmistakably, blue. The other family member, the man, hung back a moment. He stepped to the rail in front of Sergeant Vane, and he was crying without shame, a grown man undone, and he could not find words, and so he simply brought himself to attention, clumsy, untrained, but with everything he had, and held it, facing the guardsman for 3 full seconds. A civilian salute. The only thank you large enough. Sergeant Vane on his post, his eyes forward once more, his form perfect again, the watch his own again. Sergeant Vane gave him, in return, the smallest possible inclination of the head. 1/4 of an inch. The same 1/4 inch with which the whole morning had begun. From any distance it would have looked like nothing at all. It was everything. Then the family was gone through the arch, and the medic, and the officer last of all, who paused only to look back once at his sergeant with an expression I can only call pride, the pride of a man who had gambled his own name on someone and been proven right. And the forecourt slowly became a forecourt again. The phones came back up, but at the stone now, at the gilded rail, at the bored business of being tourists. Not one of them, I am glad to say, had a clear picture of the old woman's face, because we had made sure of it. 4 strangers in a line. The boy in the soccer shirt picked up my camera from the cobbles where I'd left it and handed it back to me without a word, and we shook hands, and I never learned his name. I went home that day, and I did not work. I sat for a long time with the camera in my lap and did not turn it on. I went back to the forecourt the following week, and the week after, the way you return to a place where something true happened to you, half hoping to find it changed and half terrified that it would be. It was not changed. The light still turned the rail to honey just after 9. And there, on the painted line, stood a guardsman not always vain. They rotate, of course, immaculate and motionless, rifle at the shoulder, giving the laughing tourists exactly nothing. But I look at them differently now. I cannot help it. I look at the rigid bright figures on their posts and I no longer see statues or symbols or props for a photograph. I see the man under the wool. I see what it costs, the holding, and what it is for. Because I learned on an ordinary cold morning what that stillness is actually built to do. We think it is built to be impressive. We think it is for show, for the tourists, for the postcard. It is not. It is built so that when someone arrives at the end of a long and frightening journey, lost in a sliding world, steering by the last landmark they can still see, a tall fixed point in a bright red coat, a man who stands the watch and does not leave, they will find that the landmark is real, and that it is kind, and that it has been waiting for them all along. Sergeant Adler Vane never moved from his post that morning. That is the official record, and it is true. A King's Guardsman held his line through the whole of it and never once stepped off the painted mark. But I was there, 20 feet away, with my camera forgotten on the stones, and I will tell you what I saw. I saw a man become, for one frightened old woman who had lost everything but the way home, the gate she had been searching for all her life. I saw him let her keep her watch, and then I saw him relieve her of it gently so that she could finally rest. I saw the most disciplined man on that forecourt break every soft rule of his trade without moving a muscle anyone could measure, because the deepest rule of all, the one beneath the protocol, the one the uniform is really built to protect, is that you do not leave the lost alone. He stood his post, and by standing it he brought her home,